down to start writing, it
Sorry,
was
I
just a
couldn't.
matter of me telling a story. I had no idea I was going to win the awards that I won.
Yeah, well, it's pretty impressive. I mean, how do they find out about your books? Do you put them on awards platforms? Do you submit them, or you just they discover you?
A little bit of both, but mostly my publisher, Black Rose Writing, informs us of this contest or that contest, this platform or that platform, and being a real newbie in writing and in publishing, I just kind of follow along with what they suggest, and it worked out to my benefit, I guess.
Yeah, obviously, it's fantastic. Well, all right. For to the purposes of keeping our guests informed, um, my name is Ray Alaplane. I'm an author as well. I'm
Mhm.
also a reviewer on the iWick platform. I'm sure you know that. I've
Yes,
reviewed some of your books, and we're speaking to Joseph Lewis. And where do you live, Joseph? What part of America are you in?
I live in Fredericksburg, Virginia,
Okay,
East Coast.
East Coast.
Yes.
So you're okay, good. All right. And your profession is you're a teacher, right?
Well, I'm a part-time counselor. I retired from school administration in 2020, just before COVID hit in earnest. It was a very good decision on my part. And then I was all set to do some subbing here and there. But in August, a friend of mine who's an elementary principal called me up and asked if I could do a favor. So I was a long-term sub in third grade, which was a real stretch for me. I had never taught anything less than seventh grade, and it's
Wow.
been 30 plus years since I was ever in a classroom. So it was one of the best experiences, honestly, that I've ever had.
Really?
Yes. And so then they finally hired somebody after about 6 weeks. And then another friend called me up and said, Joe, I need a favor. And I was their online learning supervisor for about a year and a half. And then I finally retired, and I thought I was going to be fully retired. But then my wife is a PE teacher and an athletic director up at a middle school in the northern part of our county. And she and her principal got to talking, and they wanted me to run a kind of a behavior intervention um, program for kids who misbehave and things like that. I'd work with them one on one.
Hmm.
So I did that for a year, and then they asked me if I would be a part time counselor, and I jumped at it because in my 49 years of being in education, I would say that I was the absolute happiest when I was in the counseling office because you're dealing directly with kids, you're working with them, and
Hmm.
you're working with their parents. And so I just see it as a blessing. So that's what I'm doing now. I do that 3 days a week. And we'll see how long that goes. It depends upon funding and all the other good stuff, but I'm having a blast.
That's great. How would you say, I mean, in this aspect, in this period now where you're doing this counseling, how has that affected your writing?
I would say that many of the stories that I tell, especially in terms of characters, their development, what they've gone through, what they say, are things that I've heard either in the hallway, the cafeteria, or in my office. Um, Obviously, I fictionalize a lot of it, but there's some stuff that I would have to fictionalize it because there's some stuff that were told to me or shared with me that if I were to put that on paper, nobody would believe it, even though I write fiction. So so I do have to fictionalize it.
That's interesting because in your book, Black Yay, do you pronounce it Black Yay?
Black Yé'ii.
Yee, okay,
Yeah, it's Navajo. It's a spiritual deity.
right. You have these seven boys.
Mhm.
Are any of these characters inspired by people you've in from your school years? Or
Oh yes,
okay,
very very much so. In 2014, my son was shot and killed, and so when you read my books, there's an inkling of death. There is um, kids faced with um, choices that they have to make, and some of the choices that they make are not so great as
Mm,
any kid would. And I think a lot of that has to do the impact of my son's death on myself and on our family.
mm.
So I think that's tied very much into it. But I would say a lot of it comes from my counseling background, my psychology background, and then just walking hallways as an administrator, listening to the conversations. What is weird, honestly, is that the kids are oblivious to me walking along. And so I hear about what parties are going down, where they're going to be, what time they're going to be at. And, I hear everything.
You're the perfect fly on the wall.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's great. I mean, it's interesting because in reading, I read well, I read the last two or three of your books, but in this last one, it really seemed like the narratives and the conversations between the seven boys are very real. Like they're really like I mean, there's a lot of dialogue in the story, even though there's a lot of brutality
Hmm.
in the
Um,
murders and and the violence that takes place. But the dialogues are very yeah, they're very like down to earth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really work hard on that. One of the books that I read on writing was a thing called Shut Up, He Explained. And I can't remember who the author was, but it was a book on dialogue. And it talked about dialogue tags first. It talked about the realistic dialogue. And what I try to do is make it as realistic as possible. Um, as I said, I really fall back on the kids that I've worked with, the stories that they told me, the parents that shared stories with me, and I try to make it as real as possible. And I think that is one characteristic that almost every reviewer in all 10 books have pointed out that the dialogue seems to be so very authentic and very real. And I really appreciate that because I work hard at it.
Yeah, it gives a good balance in the book because, too much violence, too much
Yes.
well, it becomes a stereotype. But when you have the dialogue, it brings it down to earth and it makes it very real. You can relate to what's going on, what
Yes.
goes, yeah, in between the scenes when what is it, the M13 are they? Are
MS-13.
yeah, the MS-13.
Yeah, they are. It's a gang. It started out with El Salvadorians in Los Angeles, California, as a way to protect them when they immigrated to the United States. But like any gang, they migrate to drugs, to human trafficking, to weapons, things like that. And of the gangs that are in the United States, MS-13 seems to be one of the toughest, most brutal gangs there is. And even at the little middle school that I'm at, we have about 900 kids, just shy of 1,000. And MS-13 is actually coming down and recruiting middle school kids of 11, 12, 13 years of age.
Really,
And
huh?
the younger that they get, most laws in the United States favor the juvenile. And so they'll get thrown in juvie for a little bit of time and then get out at 21. And so that it's not
Yeah, and then they're protected by the gang.
exactly, yes. So that's a gang that when I first started reading about MS-13, that was in 2018 when I wrote a book called Caught in a Web. And the idea for that particular book happened when I was reading the newspaper.
Hmm.
On the front page was an article about how kids, adolescents, were ODing on a combination of heroin and fentanyl, two very big depressants on heart, lungs, things like that.
Yeah.
And about 2 or 3 pages further was the rise of MS-13 in the area that I live in and how they're coming down from the DC area and recruiting into Virginia. And so the idea just happened to combine those two ideas, drugs and gang, and see what I could come up with. And in many respects, Black Yé'ii is, even though it's a standalone, and even though Cotton Web is a standalone, I would say that Black Yé'ii is kind of a sequel to Cotton Web because it picks up on the on a lie that was formulated by three cops after a shooting in a house.
Right.
And if they did that purposely, because if MS-13 knew the truth and who did the shooting, who did the killing, they would be back in a vengeance to exact revenge and to teach a lesson.
Yeah.
So the ideal was that we're going to keep this secret and nobody was supposed to share it. But in Black Yé'ii, you find out right away that somebody talked and the secret is now out in the open.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it definitely holds you onto the end to find out what happens.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Let's discuss the Black EE
Sure.
aspect. Why that name? Why did you pick what Indian tribe is it from again?
Navajo.
It's the
And,
Navajo. Okay.
yes, and the Navajo are found in northeastern Arizona, up in
Hmm.
the desert. The Navajo Nation Reservation is there. And two of my characters actually come from that reservation, and they're adopted into this family of seven boys.
That's right. I remember that.
And in a Yé'ii, as I said, is a spiritual deity. It's very much, if you think of the Catholics or the Episcopalians, they have many, many, many saints. And Yé'ii, there are many, many different Yé'ii in the Navajo spiritual culture. There is one, however, that they don't even mention by name or talk about, and that's Black Yé'ii, which translates roughly to the evil one, because they feel by talking about it and even mentioning its name, you're inviting evil into your own life
Hmm.
and the lives of those around you.
Interesting.
And and that has that dynamic, that background, I think, is at play throughout the whole book.
And that's sort of in reference to the gang itself, right?
Yes, yes,
As sort of a personification of that
yes.
evilness.
Hmm.
That's interesting. Very interesting. So the book itself, okay, we got the background on how it sort of came about, and like
Hmm.
you said, it's sort of a sequel to the earlier story.
Yes.
Um, you plan anything else on this? Is this going to become a series at all?
Well, like Patterson does, or Baldacci does, or Sanford does, they take their core characters and just move them from one adventure to another. And that's really what I've done in my books.
Yeah.
Um, Starting out with the Lives trilogy of Taking Lives, which was the prequel, then Stolen Lives, Shattered Lives, and Splintered Lives. I've taken those core characters and just moved them forward, and Caught in a Web just happened to be the next book after the trilogy and prequel. And then each book after that, I might highlight a different character from that group or different characters. But I think what sets me apart from Baldacci or Cross, or I should say that a Patterson, which is with his Cross character, or John Sanford with his Lucas Davenport character, is that I have a strong coming of age thread running through all my books. And I think that stems from the seven adopted kids, or as one reviewer called it, a patchwork family of adopted boys, which I really like that description because it
Wow.
is. And each of them have baggage from one thing or another, and they're dealing with it as best they can. And each book, I try to bring them a little bit closer to maturity, a little bit closer to young adulthood and adulthood. And so I think the readers, for the most part, really enjoy that aspect.
Would you say that your books appeal to the young adult demographic?
My books have actually been read from middle school all the way up through old age and above. So,
Okay, impressive, impressive. I mean, it's interesting because I mean the other authors that you mentioned are not necessarily targeting that particular demographic. It's probably more of an adult uh,
I would agree with you. Yes.
perspective. So it's yeah. So you do have a unique position there. You've got a special little
Hmm.
niche. That's cool. That's very
Yeah.
cool. Um, on your background, I was reading up some more. And so 49 years in the education field.
Hmm.
Let's just talk about that for a quick moment from the perspective of readership today, because I think as authors, we're all facing the same uh, potential problem. that iPhones and the digital world has sort of stolen the readership. I mean, is that because of the technology, or do you think is it a problem in education? Have the curriculums failed us, or kids are just not interested in reading as much these days? Or what's your
You,
take on it?
I've never, in all the interviews that I've done, I've never been asked that question. That's a great question. Um, I would say that, if you look at a typical English curriculum, whether it be middle school or high school, they really center on the classics. You might have a Mary Shelley Frankenstein. You will definitely have Lord of the Flies by Golding. But you have, I think it's so programmed that many times kids can't choose a book that they really want to read.
Hmm.
And I don't know who said it, but I believe this to be true that if a kid or an adult says, I really don't like reading all that much, to me, it's they have not found the right book yet.
Hmm.
Because how can you not enjoy reading and getting lost in a world that was created and put together with interesting characters? um, how can you not enjoy something like that, especially if you have a book and the electricity is out, like my daughter's was yesterday and last night. She's an avid reader, and so she was pretty content just sitting at home reading her books. And if you have no one else, if you have nothing else, you have a book.
Oh,
It's portable, and you can absolutely get lost in it if you allow yourself to. So I think it's a combination of people just not finding the right book, or English curriculum so programmed and so restrictive in reading the classics, Shakespeare and Chaucer and all the others that are out there. I don't know that kids have a chance to choose a book that they
oh.
really want to read.
That's interesting. So they're not really connecting with that particular area because, yeah, like you said, it's nothing that's appealing to them.
Right.
What about the subject of just the digitalization, the world of we all know kids live in today with their iPhones and TikTok and Insta and all this other stuff. Has this drawn them away from reading, do you think? Or is that,
I think even worse. Yes, it's drawn them away from reading, but I think it's drawn them away from people.
hmm,
I challenge any adult just to go to a restaurant, the next time you go to a restaurant for a meal and look around at who's on their phone when they're sitting across from a loved one, wife, spouse, somebody.
right.
Um, and they're just not engaging anymore because they're engaging with their phone or whatever.
Well,
I think we've made a disservice when we're raising kids. It's easy just to stick them in front of a TV set and watch Bear in the Big Blue House or something like that. When Why aren't we working with them? Why aren't we playing with them, teaching them constructive ways to play, to deal with people, using words, growing with their
hmm,
vocabulary? And I think technology it is sometimes more fun, I guess, to sit on a phone or and watch reels or TikTok or whatever it is, or texting their buddies and not really engaging with the people that are right across from them,
oh,
that are working with them, that are trying to engage with them. So I think we do a disservice.
no, it's true. I agree with you. And I think like you said, it weakens their social skills, and the social
Yes,
skills is what they need when they come out into the
absolutely.
real world from school and life. They need to have those social skills so they know how to rub elbows and
Yes.
uh,
We've noticed that in America when COVID hit and school was basically an online program. Yes, you had a class of 20, 30 people, but they were all doing their own thing.
mm,
Some sort of an online learning program.
mm,
There wasn't a whole lot of interaction. And in many cases, when kids got back to school, they forgot how to act. They, for instance, forgot the rules. They don't treat the adults with respect that they once did. If you and I, growing up, if we were to say the things that I've heard some of the kids say, or do the things
There would have been
do,
consequences.
oh my gosh,
Yeah,
yeah, not only would we get it in school, but more than likely our parents would just about kill us when we got home because the phone call was made.
that's right. That's
And
right.
I don't see consequences so much for the kids that
Oh,
I work with at the middle school.
no. Yeah, I think it's a little fair to say that, the digital world has just sort of turned it into a two-dimensional universe for these kids. But the thing about reading, in our experience, at IWIC and just as an author, and I think you agree, it's a three-dimensional world or a fourth
Yes,
or five-dimensional, because in your head, you can produce any dimension. And that's the beauty of words, is that they just sort of catalyze
I agree
amazing
with you
things.
wholeheartedly. I do what's called head hopping
Hmm.
in my books. I might be in this character's head, and then the next chapter I'm in a different character's head. And I think that gives the reader a perspective of what is this person feeling? Why is this person acting like
Uh,
this? And I think in our reading, we're able to do that with the characters that are presented to you. I try really hard to not make cardboard cutout characters. If you think of like the movie Jaws, for instance, with the
hmm.
big shark, there was not a whole lot of character development
No,
in that story at all. I
no,
mean, basically, you're afraid of a shark, and nobody wanted to get in the water. You had the crazy captain who's an alcoholic, and you had the guy who was the marine biologist who was kind of a geeky guy, and then you had the guy who was afraid of the water, which was the sheriff in town, the police
right.
chief. But basically, the character was the shark.
Yeah, and everybody else was developed around the shark.
Yes,
That you
absolutely.
saw their characters come out based on their fears and their terrors or
Yes,
whatever. That's fascinating. Well, we're getting close to ending here. This is only a 30-minute interview, so
sure.
not that we couldn't carry on for another hour. You're great to talk to. If you were going to give any advice to authors, because we deal with them at IWIC all the time, all over the world, and we get novice ones, new ones who are just aspiring, coming out with their new novels, and we have a lot of veterans too. But what
Mhm.
advice would you give them? Because you're obviously successful. You're on the
Thank
up
you.
and up as an author. So what would you tell them? What kind of advice would you give them?
I would say don't ever quit. Um, I used to coach basketball at the high school and collegiate level, and I would always coach my athletes to not get too high and not get too low
Hmm,
because basketball was a game of mistakes. The winner was the team that didn't make as many mistakes as the other team did.
right.
And I think as a writer, whether you're a seasoned pro or whether you're just starting out, don't get yourself so high that, I got 6 5-star reviews. Yay. And don't get yourself so low when the ones in the 2 star reviews come along
Right.
because we've all gotten them. And yes, it's kind of crushing. And why did the person write this? Why was that 4 not a 5? What could I have done differently to get that 5 instead of the 4? And I think if you keep yourself on an even keel and you just keep going and you just keep learning
Hmm,
from whatever is written or felt about your book, you're going to improve.
no.
Don't ever take no for an answer because if one door shuts, there's going to be another door that's opened. Like my brother Jim says, if there's no door, there's a window, and you jump out of the window. If there's no
There's
door,
always an
so
alternative.
there is. And so I think as a writer of any level, keep yourself even keeled and don't quit. Just keep at it.
It's great. It's great advice. It's great advice. Yeah, because yeah, the like you said, the reviews can be up or down. Just don't overthink the process. It's
Yes.
um, and a lot of authors I've studied up on too have said that when you're writing, also don't make sure you're writing a book that you want to read.
Yes.
And I think that's
Yes.
important too.
Hmm.
And clearly, that's what you've done here because your book is inspired by real people and by incidents in your life. So
Thank you. I really believe, as Stephen King said, that if there's no tears in the writer, there's going to be no tears in the reader.
that's right.
And I really believe that. If I would think that if you're reading my books, there's an emotion that jumps off the page, and I think that's their deliberate, because if I can think of several passages in Black Yé'ii, and the one just previous to Black Yé'ii called Fan Mail. There were times when I wept, and my wife is looking at me like, "What are you doing over there?" And I'm just saying, "Well, I'm in Brian's head, and this happened to him." And she just kind of shakes her head because that's what she does. And I write at the kitchen table where I am right now, and she's over there talking to me as I'm writing. I don't like to sit in a corner. Now, if there's something that I need to edit and I want to get it just right, I'll go off someplace by myself. But I really like that feedback. I like to be around people
Yeah.
when I write, and so I think that my conversations that I have with the characters, their conversations with each other, like you said, and I really appreciate that, Rel, is that they are as authentic as I could possibly make them. And I think if you have well-rounded, full-blooded characters and not just cardboard cutouts, I think that inspires the reader to keep on going.
Well, I would agree with you on that completely. And I think, just on that point, it's one of the falling points, not in the writing world, but if you look at a lot of the Hollywood stuff coming out these days and TV series and films, they lack that quality
Yes,
that where you can't identify with the characters because they're not real. They're just
right.
they're cookie cutter or they're cardboard cutouts, like you said, and that really kills it right there because then you're
Yeah,
just watching a sort of a two-dimensional
yes.
film.
You know, when I give talks on writing, the first thing I say is this is not a profession that gets you wealthy. If you look at, let's say, an ebook, and I would say 7 or 8 out of 10 books are going to be ebooks rather than the paperback.
That's right.
And those go from 6.95 all the way down to 99 cents or even free. And so if a person only invests, let's say, $3, if you don't hit them within the first couple of pages with a character that they can really like and identify, you lose them.
That's right.
Worse, you get a crappy review, which will cause repercussions on down the road. So I think you really have to snag them at the beginning. You have to have a character, because if I invest $3, it's very easy for me just to go on to the next book if I'm not liking it.
Yeah.
So I think it for you and I who are writers, we take the characters and the hook right at the very beginning realistically, and we take it seriously because we know the importance of that when
That's
we're
right.
writing.
That's right. It's what is it? The 3 second, there's a 5 second rule in marketing. You have to get their
That's right.
attention right away. I mean, I know a book isn't going to be quite that short, but it's the same concept.
Sure.
And maybe even more so today because we have the world has
Fickle.
become even more spectatorish. They're looking for the
Yes.
quick fix, the dopamine kick,
Yep. I
right
agree with
away.
you.
So, well, all right. I think that's great advice and awesome talking to you.
It was very fun. Thank you. Great questions.
Yeah, well, and you're a writer, we like to pry some gems out of you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we look forward to more books down the line. I'm sure that we're going to see you again on our iWick platform.
Sure.
And certainly when you get some new stuff coming out, we'll happily do another interview with you. There's no,
Oh, that'd be great. Thank
yeah,
you.
there's no one-time fix on this thing.
All right. Excellent.
All right, Joseph, thank you for joining us on the podcast, and we'll
Thank you
call
for
it a
having
day.
me. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Bye bye now.
Bye bye now.